So cool. As you can see, we're currently looking at Nautilus. This can be any champion. I just clicked Nautilus because I need to mess around with his runes anyways. So, right, let's start. First of all, you do the whole tap, you can hover over, you can see any sort of damage numbers, and that's really the basics. From there, right, when you're choosing your keystone, you can choose pretty much any keystone. I'm going to use Nautilus as my example here because I think supports have a variety of builds that they can go, especially now. I think that another good idea would be like, I'll probably show this off later, but Zed is another champion that I think has a lot of varied builds that'd be cool to look at. So, alright, we'll talk about Nautilus. First of all, you can see something already. This page is really funky. That's what I was talking about where, see if you tap on it, it'll swap. As you saw, I had it on this, but because I didn't save the page, it goes back to that. So you just have to remember you have to manually save this every time. It's really, really annoying. So starting off for, let's say, support keystones, you're like, what is my choices? Well, I have Electrocute. Within 3 seconds, hit the same enemy champion within 3 basic attacks or abilities. This is already kind of out the window. I'm not really looking to do damage as a support unless I'm playing a very specific playstyle. Airy. Poke Protect. Your attacks and abilities set area to a target, damaging enemies or shielding allies. Okay, that's a maybe. But I'm not going to be shielding allies, and if I really do need damage, I can just take Scorch. Phase Rush. Using basic attacks or abilities on an enemy champion 3 times within 4 seconds grants movement speed and reduces the remaining cooldown of enemy basic abilities by 20%. I think this is good. Just the ability to use your hook and your CC again gets you a lot of value. Conqueror. Stacking damage ramp. Gain stacks of adaptive force when hitting a champion with separate attacks or abilities. Stacks up to 6 times. Again, like I said, I'm a support. I'm not looking to do a ton of damage. Maybe if you're going Nautilus like top lane or jungle, you take that, but not really. Fleet Footwork. Sort of in the same vein, right? Moving, attacking, and casting builds. Energy stacks at 100 stacks. Your next attack heals you. Grants you increased movement speed and restores mana or energy if you attack a champion. Again, it's another damage rune. Not really interested. Kraken Slayer. Sort of the same thing. There's a lot of damage runes and not a lot of great support runes in my opinion, especially since they remove Fauna of Life as a keystone. Gain stacks when hitting a champion with an attack. When reaching 3 stacks, deal bonus damage on that attack. Grasp of the Undying. Every 3 seconds in combat, your next attack on a champion will be enhanced. You'll gain HP and you'll do some bonus damage. This is sort of a maybe on some supports if you do intend to be brawling a lot, but again, you're considering that, like, if you're a support, you should be playing this correctly. You should be roaming. You're not going to be in combat a lot. You're intending to sort of help your jungler get a gank off and then get out. So not really what you're looking for. Aftershock. After immobilizing an enemy champion, gain defenses and deal a burst of magic damage around you. This one's very good, specifically because it does a little bit of damage, and you get mostly that defenses early, right? You're getting 35 armor early, 35 MR early, and it also scales off of your bonus armor and your bonus MR, right? So you're getting a lot of defenses that you can use, and you're going to be immobilizing enemies often, especially with how Nautilus uses his kit. It's also very important, like I said earlier, to take into account what your champion wants to do. If you're playing Zed, you should not take Aftershock. You have no CC. It's just very important to be like, hey, what does my champion want to do? I'll probably go deeper into it when I talk about Zed a little more. Like I said, supports are very simple in the fact that you can kind of just talk about them very easily. Lethal Tempo, gain stacks of attack speed. Nope, I can already tell, right? I'm a support. I don't need to be auto-attacking a bunch. Nautilus is passive, right? It only needs 1 hit to stop to root them. So if I'm auto-attacking a bunch, I'm not getting a ton of value. First Strike. 0.25 seconds after engaging an enemy champion in combat, dealing damage grants you 5 gold, and a first strike effect that lasts 3 seconds to you, allowing you to deal 9% bonus true damage to an enemy. Once the effect is ended, gain gold equal to bonus damage dealt. Again, not really what I'm looking for. I don't need a ton of gold as support. My support item will do that for me. Glacial Augment. This one's really good. Landing an attack on an enemy champion reduces their movement speed by 20% for 1.5 seconds. It only affects each champion 1 time within 10 seconds. And mobilizing an enemy champion triggers 3 glacial rays that radiate towards you, creating a frozen region that lasts for 2 seconds. It reduces movement speed and damage dealt. So, things to consider, right? When we're looking at this, we're really thinking about 3 main ones, right? We've got Phase Rush, we've got Aftershock, and we've got Glacial Augment. So, Phase Rush, right? Why would we pick Phase Rush? Cooldown reduction early, cooldown reduction late. As you go through the game, you will likely be building more cooldown reduction as the game goes on. So phase rush is good, but it's not necessarily what we want. We also don't need a ton of movement speed, and that movement speed burst isn't really going to help us because we expect to be hooking enemies anyways, so we're not going to need to chase them down. Right? And then Aftershock. After immobilizing an enemy champion, you gain defenses around you and deal burst of magic damage around you. So gaining the defenses is really good if we think we're going to be squishy early. However, because of how the new runes work, right, we can choose 3 early defensive runes in this green tree and be fine. So that's something to consider. For example, let's talk about sort of 2 different builds here. Glacial Augment I think is good. I talked about it earlier. But let's sort of take into account, right? Let's say, and we're going back to the screen cap here. So playing out this draft, like I said, you don't necessarily need another tank on your team, right? Because you're going to have Malphite, he's going to have a lot of shielding. What you want probably is something to slow down the enemy team, make sure they can't get to your backline, and slow them down so that your Lilia can get a lot of her abilities off and get her passive off, allowing her to run into the fight, use her Q, and then use her W, and then let her go to big sleep. So we're going to go Glacial Augment here. That said, there are a few options once you go Glacial Augment. This is a rune combo that I theorized earlier in the day. Check out my Twitter if you want to see me insane posting. But if you do something like this, where you go item crafting, futures market, demolish. Not bad in my opinion. So why are we picking these runes? So first of all, right, remember the earlier steps I talked about? We chose our keystone, and then we chose one of each of the 3 boxes. So why are we choosing item crafting, right? Well, here's the thing. As the support, maybe we don't want to recall that often. You might want to get your early recall off and then try to stay in lane for as long as possible. If you're doing that, it'd be nice to buy items outside of base. However, item crafting makes your items cost 150 extra gold, which is a lot, right? That's why we have futures market, which lets you purchase items on credit, which is 145 plus 7 a minute. So at minute 1 it'll be 145, minute 2 it'll be 152, minute 3 it'll be 159, etc., etc. Well, why am I talking about specifically only playing this with futures market? It's because you're mortgaging, right, what you have for what you will have. Futures market lets you go into debt, right? So it's like, why would you pay 150 extra for an item? Well, with futures market, you're not actually paying 150 extra for the item. You're paying 150 extra that you will get in the future. So let's say you pay and you're like, okay, cool. I've now gone $145 or 145 gold into debt because I used the futures market to subtract and cut it off so it only was really 5 extra gold. Well, now you're you're 140 gold in debt. But that doesn't really matter because you have your item and you have your power spike. What it's doing is it's allowing you to gain an extra tempo and advantage on the map. That's a consideration. The other thing is, well, let's say I'm going to be a support, I'm not going to be earning a lot of gold, so I want to go something a little bit more passive. You can go Hex Flash, Transcendence, Demolish, or you can go Nimbus Cloak. Obviously, right when we're considering this, we have a few things to consider. So I've talked about why I liked item crafting. Now let's talk about why I like Hex Flash. So Hex Flash, what it allows you to do is basically you get a second flash. However, you have to charge up that flash beforehand. So the correct way to explain it would be you move extremely slow for approximately 2 seconds, and as you go longer into those 2 seconds, your flash gets longer. So you can sit right next to a wall, hold your flash or Hex Flash for 2 seconds, flash over that wall, and then try to attempt to hook or ult somebody even when your flash is down, right? Still giving you that engage potential. We go Transcendence here to gain the ability haste early so that we can get more poke off in lane. Also the basic ability reset cooldown is really nice. And then we go Nimbus Cloak so that when we do use our Hex Flash, right? Because think about it this way, Flash you're only going to have every 120 seconds. But Hex Flash is up every 20 seconds. And you don't have to hold Hex Flash for the same amount. So even if you Hex Flash nowhere, you still would get the movement speed from Nimbus Cloak. Like how junglers will abuse the movement speed from Smite. So that's something to consider. Demolish is also an option here. I think if you're going Hex Flash though, it's probably better to go Nimbus Cloak because of how the combo I said earlier. So let's talk about the other trees on this. So I think that if you're going to go Aftershock, you'd probably want to go something like that. And then you're probably going to want to choose from one of the green. So let's talk about the green as I build the Glacial Augment build. Even though I said earlier you don't need a full tank, I think that you still definitely want to be a little bit tankier. So you have a few options on your box here. We have Font of Life, which heals enemies or heals allies and yourself when you attack enemies. You have the Colossus, which lets you gain a shield when you immobilize an enemy. And then you have Nullifying Orb, which is awful, don't take it. I say this because if you're getting this low health anyways, you're close to dying, so you should just know your limits better. Like this is a rune that will help you out of sticky situations, but you shouldn't eating into those situations in the first place if you're playing correctly. So really then we only have the options between Font of Life and Courage of the Colossus. I think that Font of Life is really good here. The ability to just get some healing off in lane, especially as a tank that doesn't have a lot of healing. Even if you are going Boots Rush, that 100% regen doesn't really do a lot. So I think this is a very good rune. Not to mention, although it doesn't actually provide tank stats, it provides you some tankiness in other ways, right? Healing is still being tankier because you're giving your team health. It's also just another consideration for the enemy for when they're building. And that's just something that's really nice to have. And it just makes the enemy think a little more. And so you're trying to throw doubt in their minds. For the second one, we have Second Wind, which lets you regenerate health. You have Loyalty, which gains 2 MR, or 2 AR and 5 AR, and they gain 5 armor and 2 MR for your closest ally. And then Bone Plating. So when you're choosing between these, I don't think you'd ever choose Loyalty. Loyalty just isn't a great rune. 5 armor is not a lot, and neither is 5 MR. It's just like, let's think about the math real quick here. That's not what I wanted to hit. Alright, so let's say you are going to buy a basic item. That's 20 armor. That's 20 magic resist, right? That's not a lot comparatively to the Loyalty. So Loyalty isn't really providing a lot. Versus something like Bone Plating, which will block, 30 to 60 damage, which is actually a very good amount early game. Right? So even when you're getting your most value out of Loyalty, it's not doing a lot. Not to mention, I think Boots Rush is going to be very popular this patch, And because Boots Rush is going to be very popular, the value of armor and MR is going to be lower. Because the value of MR is going to be lower, why is that? It's because those boots have pen on them, and so the enemy's going to be having a lot more armor penetration early than normal. That said, I think that there is definitely an argument for second wind. The reason I say that is not because of any specific reason that has to do with your build. It's because your boots, right? They're going to give you plus 100% health regen, so it might be worthwhile going second wind. I think this is one of those judgment calls where it's like, I don't really know what I want to pick. Maybe it'll be team dependent, right? If we go back and we think about that game, they're playing an Ashe and a Braum bot lane. So that means they will probably trying to be comboing you down, especially given that they have the Kha'Zix. So I'd probably take Bone Plating. Finally, we have our final rune. We have Overgrowth, we have Revitalize, and we have Perseverance. So Overgrowth. When 2 minions or 1 monster are killed nearby, gain 3 max health. Max health can be increased indefinitely, infinitely, and gains a bonus 3.5% max health upon reaching 30 stats. And then you gain scalable bonus max health, is what it's saying. Revitalize. Gain a 5% application when casting a heal or shield. If the target's health is lower than 40%, amplifies its effects by an additional 10%. So these two might be useful. I don't really think Revitalize is that useful. You only have one shield on Nautilus, which is your own shield. And if you're going to be trying to survive with that shield, you might as well just take Courage of the Colossus instead, or Overgrowth, right, which provides you a lot of tankiness. However, I want to talk about Perseverance, specifically because, right, this depends on what you're going to choose over here. So the reason I want to talk about Perseverance is, for those of you that weren't paying attention, Merc's Treads no longer has tenacity. And given that the enemy team comp you're playing against, right, it is a Aatrox, an Ahri, an Ashe, a Braum, a Kha'Zix. There's a lot of CC there. So I think it's probably worthwhile to go Perseverance and Hex Flash. Well, let's say you really want to be a little bit more tankier, right? And you're like, no, I really want that extra health because I think that the Ashe probably won't take Giant Slayer, so that health is good. Well, you're probably gonna have to sacrifice Hex Flash here, but what you can do is you can go Legend Tenacity, which gives you 3% Tenacity, 3% Slow Resist when you take down monsters, enemy champions, or minions. You're probably not gonna be taking down a ton of you're probably not going to be taking down a ton of monsters or minions, so you might not get the full value there. But if you're playing well, I think you should be able to get the value out of the enemy champions. And even then, it's still not a bad amount compared to, right? This is 10%, so as long as you proc this 4 times, right, out of 5, you can get to 9% tenacity off of 3 procs, and you're also getting the slow resist, and then you're also, you can have the ability to get 6 additional percent over Perseverance. That said, it's going to be a lot weaker early game, so you're sort of taking the trade-off there, right? If you are worried about early game plays, especially in regards to CC, which Braum does a lot of, I think that you'd probably go something like this, which is what I probably would go. You could also go something like Demolish. Demolish is really good on supports, but again, that really depends on whether you think you can win your lane matchup or not, right? So the other thing to talk about here is there's a lot to runes now. You're going to have to be very aware of why you're picking something. And there's not really... people will tell you, and there will be guides online that are like, hey, you have to do this or you have to do that, and like, these are the best builds. But it's just not true. And the reason that it's not true is not because like the guides are wrong. Like, I'll use it's Stewart's as an example because he does great work, and I think that a lot of his guides are very good. But it's a very much redactive thing, right? Because if somebody's telling you always take Overgrowth and you always take Demolish, and then you're gonna play into So let's say you're not comfortable with editing all of it, right? You're like, okay, well, I really don't feel comfortable being able to swap it all up in the fly. My suggestion to you then would be to only edit this side, the side that I'm tapping, the right side, because it's one rune. And that's my suggestion to you, right? Start with one rune and then be like, okay, I will ignore my keystone. I will ignore this right side over here that I'm tapping right now, or the left side, and I will just focus on the right side. The reason I say that is because it's narrowing down your field of vision, right? Because there's a lot of information, especially when it comes to the runes right now. And so what you're doing is you're narrowing down your field of vision. You're like, hey, there's a lot of information here that I can't process all at once. You're going to devour it in bite-sized chunks, right? You're going to be like, oh, cool. I see there's a problem on the enemy team, so I'm just going to go boom, boom, boom. And then once you get comfortable doing that, you're like, oh, I see this. I need to take that. Then I'd say start moving to your keystones. I say move to your keystones second because, again, it's one thing, right? Because you're going from one thing here to then one thing here. So now you're dealing with two things. Then, once you've sort of gotten that down and you feel comfortable, right? Because it's about how you feel comfortable. It's about taking it at your pace. Right? Don't feel forced to do it earlier or later than you want to. Then I think you'd start messing around with the blue side, right? Because you can do things like I talked about where it's like, oh, I want to go something like this, and then I want to do, that's a misclick. I want to do something like this, and then I want to do something like this or this, where I have, so I can get the tenacity early. And like, there's going to be a lot of information that maybe you have memorized. When you play, it sort of becomes natural. And just get used to changing it up, right? Just get used to being flexible. Now I'm going to swap over a little bit. This is going to go into some more advanced topics, I think. At least I intend to. So that's sort of my basic guide done. Moving on to the cool stuff. So I'm going to be talking about a lot of the combos that I think are good, at least currently in the current patch. A lot of the items are bugged as far as I can tell, or a lot of the descriptions are bugged. I think Zombie Ward is probably bugged. I think Eyeball Collector is also probably bugged. So, yeah. Just know that if you are watching this and it isn't the patch that these runes were released on. Just be aware of that. So, let's start. First of all, you have Zed, right? Zed can go a multitude of runes. He can go Electrocute. He can go Phase Rush, maybe. It's not very good. He can go Conquer. He can go Fleet Footwork. He can't really go Kraken Slayer or Undying Grasp. And he can also go First Strike. So when you're choosing a rune, why are you choosing that rune? Give me a second. And now that I've sort of I've moved away from the beginning discussions, I want to talk about the most important thing for advanced discussion in Wild Rift. It's not the fact that you get results, it's the fact that your methodology is correct. Results-based analysis It's super common in this game. It's god awful, and people don't realize that the reason they're winning is not because they chose a certain rune or because they built a certain item. It's because they got 4 kills in 3 minutes and are now turbo ahead, and they could build crit on Nautilus and win the game because you're 3 levels ahead of your enemy support, and this enemy support can't play the game. Understand the difference, right? This is one of those like critical thinking, nuanced skills that is a bit hard if you haven't necessarily played the game a ton or you aren't comfortable with how the game is going to work. You need to be able to understand the difference between I am winning this game because I just got a lead early or because we just got lucky, and I am winning this game because the decisions I made were better than the enemy team's decisions. So, let's start on the decisions you're going to make when you load into the game. You have, I'm just going to say, 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll say 4 options, right? Double the amount of Nautilus, right? So you have the Electrocute option, the Conqueror option, the Fleet Footwork option, and the First Strike option. So why would you go Electrocute? Well, what is Electrocute for? It's for burst damage. So what you're going to go Electrocute for is if you're intending to assassinate like that Orianna, right? They have a lot of AP damage on their team, that cannon, that Orianna that we saw. So what your goal is to just kill that Orianna as fast as possible, so a lot of their AP damage is gone. So that's the reason you choose that. Why would you choose Conqueror? Sustained team fights, right? Conqueror stacks an adaptive force, and that adaptive force becomes a lot, especially once you get that 8% Omnivamp. Yeah, that juicy 8% Omnivamp, and then 12 bonus AD at max stacks, up to 36 bonus AD at max stacks. A lot. Why would you go Fleet Footwork? Well, this is actually the rune that I think I might choose. I think the runes for this game are probably Fleet Footwork is the best, then Conqueror and First Strike, and then Electrocute. The reason I say that, right? Why is Fleet Footwork the best in my opinion? I think the laning phase for ranged versus melee like Orianna is really, really hard for Zed to deal with, and the sustain from Fleet Footwork is really nice. That said, nobody plays lane in Wilders correctly because they have zero clue how to lane. So you can probably just go Fleet Footwork or First Strike. Or you can probably just go Conqueror or First Strike. Why First Strike? I think First Strike is really good on snowbally assassins. I think that's where it's going to be really good. I think a lot of junglers will also take First Strike if they don't scale extremely well off of Conqueror. I think like Fiora First Strike, Kha'Zix's First Strike, the Assassin's First Strike, like I said, I think it's really good for assassins. The additional bonus gold is always very nice, especially when you can do a combo that happens very quickly and do a lot of damage. That's why you choose First Strike, right? You're doing a combo which is going to do a lot of damage, so you get the 9% bonus true damage and you get the bonus gold. I was a lot less gung-ho on First Strike at first because I read the patch notes and was like, oh, it only gives you 5 gold and 9% bonus damage, which is okay, but it's not great. It gives you 5 bonus gold, 9% true damage, and then gold equal to the 9% true damage delta, which is very, very good, because you can deal a lot of true damage very quickly if you're playing a combo-oriented jungler. I don't think this is necessarily the best example, because I don't think Gwen would take First Strike, but you could go Gwen First Strike, right? You run in, you tap the enemy once, and then you use your Snip plus your ultimate to do a lot of damage very quickly and try to rack up like 100, 200 gold just based off the fact that you're doing a lot of damage. So we're just going to say that the enemy knows how to play lane. You're probably going to want to go Fleet Footwork. Like I said, I think that due to the enemy team composition, there are a lot of alternatives that are viable. They have Orianna, Vi. What was it again? It was like Orianna, Vi, Zeri, Cannon, Orianna. Definitely some squishies. Or Orianna, Cannon, Alistar, Vi, Zeri. I don't know what I was thinking. But that's not a bad team comp. On your team comp, you've got the Wukong, the Nautilus, the Camille, and the Corki. So they're all kind of aiming to go in. So you could also definitely go a dive rune like the Conqueror, like the Fleet Footwork, or like the Conqueror, like the Electrocute, to try to dive better. So you've got those options. Now getting into the meat and juice of things. what runes are you taking? You're not taking Scorch. You don't really care about the early laning phase. If you do get stomped, it's like, okay. Shield Bash. After receiving a healing or shielding effect, you're not going to be receiving healing or shielding on this team. It's not good. Sudden Impact, right? Sudden Impact is very good because you're going to be gaining, you're going to be dashing a lot as Zed, right? You blink between your different types of clones, so you're going to use that a lot. So then let's consider, okay, well, you can go Empowered Attack, Cheap Shot, or Mark of the Week. I don't really like Empowered Attack. I think that every 10 seconds, 10 damage is really bad because 8-second cooldown, 28 damage. 10-second cooldown, 10 damage. It is adaptive, which is nice, but Scorch is just better. Sorry. Mark of the Week. So Mark of the Week is a weird rune because you have to understand a few things. First of all, right, you're going to read this and you're going to be like, oh, using abilities to deal damage to enemy champions will mark them as weak, increasing damage taken by 4 to 7%, and after they take damage 3 times, the mark disappears. You gotta remember your first ability will not cause them to take the extra damage, so if you like ult on them as Zed and that is your starting point, then they will not take as much damage because what you need to do is you need to hit them once and then ult them so they get the Mark of the Week damage. Past that, you've got Eyeball Collector, you've got Ingenious Hunter, and you've got Zombie Ward. So Ingenious Hunter isn't bad. It gives you item haste after each kill, and you get 20 basic item haste. For Zombie Ward and Eyeball Collector, we're gonna again, remember that these numbers could change in the future, and then you can just do the math then. However, right now, if anyone tells you to take Eyeball Collector, they're wrong. Do not listen to them. Disregard their opinions. Because they didn't do the math. That's why I'm telling you, that's why I tell people, like, I appreciate what Ed Stewart does for the community, but when he tells somebody to take Eyeball Collector on Ahri, I can't stand it because he's not doing the math. Right? These people that do the guides, I want people to understand they don't do the math. They don't put the effort in to do the math. You have to do your math. Otherwise, you're going to be building suboptimally. Cool. So, boom. That's probably what you're taking if you're going red. Well, what if we're not going red, right? Because we also have the option to go brutal, or to go yellow, where you can go like Triumph, you can go, so Triumph, Brutal are basically the same, or Triumph is the only one out of the Brutal Gathering Storm Triumph that hasn't changed, right? Brutal is still the same, you're getting 12 to 19 on hit, and you're getting, 2, 5, 9, or 4, 10, 20, 18, 28. I don't really think Gathering Storm is that great. I just don't think that the numbers it gives you are great. That said, it's very nice for some champions. Triumph, though. 10% lost health, 10% maximum mana and energy. The reason that I take this specifically on Zed is because you do run out of energy very quickly if you blow your load and you do get a kill. Oftentimes you'll be left with no mana, and it's like, well, damn, I wish I could do something. That's why I think that this is specifically good on Zed. After that, you've got Last Stand. When your health is lower than 60, you're going to deal 5 to 11%, and then it's going to get maximum damage once you get lower than 30%. Giant Slayer, you're going to deal damage based on enemy's bonus health, up to 14% bonus damage when the enemy has 700 bonus health. And then Coup de Grace, when the enemy has less than 40% health, deal 7% bonus adaptive damage. I'd personally take Coup de Grace. I intend to talk about this later. We will go over a lot of my Twitter posts, but I think specifically Last Stand is just not good in comparison to Giant Slayer and Coup de Grace. If you think that a lot of the members of the enemy team will be building a tank item, and I mean a singular tank item, like let's say they're building Divine Sunderer, like that's not even a tank item, but it's still 350 HP, which means you're going to be getting 7% bonus damage. Like that's a good amount versus, right, 7% bonus adaptive damage when they're less than 40 AP, 40% HP. So Giant Slayer does proc really quickly. That's something to keep in mind when you do play the game. That's a little tidbit because I haven't seen many junglers going Giant Slayer outside of China. I think it's very good, and I think that you should be going. Now let's talk about this. Legend of Clarity, bonus attack speed. It would be nice as Zed, but you don't really need it. Again, Tenacity is nice. I don't think you necessarily need it. And Bloodline, again, it's nice. I don't think you necessarily need it. However, you're considering the enemy team composition here, right? There is Zeri, there is Vi, there is Alistar, and there is Kennen. Go Tenacity, right? Because even if you do get hit once, you don't want to immediately die. You'd like to be able to play the game for at least a little bit. And that's where the Tenacity really comes in handy, and that's why I think it's very good here. Domination, or Resolve. I don't really think there's a reason to build this on Zed. It definitely stunts his damage a lot, and you don't really want to do that. If for some reason you feel like you need, like you're like, oh, I really want to like get a bunch of, like I really want this. Like I really want to be tankier as Zed. I think that this is an okay build. Font of Life triggering to give you healing multiple times. If you're going like First Strike, you can be like, okay, well I'm still getting my sustain in lane, and I've got Bone Plating and Perseverance to sort of power me through. I think that a lot of these sort of air quotes, I'm doing the air quotes right now, non-traditional builds will be very frowned upon, especially for runes. However, I think that they're still very playable and very good, and I encourage people to experiment, because I don't want to have what happened every time a new rune comes out, where people are just like, yeah, this isn't as good as I like, I'm ignoring it. It's the same reason people stop playing Phase Rush when it's extremely good right now on multiple champions, and people just didn't bother to test it. And I think something like this, ignoring this side, because I think you'd probably change it up over here a little bit. Yeah, ignore that. But like something like this for your main two isn't bad. Going Inspiration, again, not necessarily a huge fan of it. I think you'd probably go something like this or like this, just to get the extra power in lane if you really don't want to recall and you're like really looking to shove wave. Specifically, this combo I think is really good because you won't have to recall as much as the enemy. You can get an item advantage, and then once you have that item advantage, you can then shove in turret, get a few tower plates, and then recall, and your investment, right? Your investment of 150 gold has really paid off very well. So now let's sort of talk about, okay, let's say we're going red here. What do I choose as my secondary rune, and why do I choose it? So first of all, you have a few options when you're choosing for your secondary rune. You have 1, 2, 3. You could go honey fruit or sweet tooth. So when you're choosing your second rune, you have to consider, right, how much damage do I intend to take in lane? Because I think that, boom, that's always a good option, right? Like just going bone plating or going second wind is very good. 3% of your max HP. Yeah, so you can always go something like that. You could also always, if you're a bit more of a tank, you could always go overgrowth. Just be like, I want the additional health stats. Obviously not something you can go on Zed, but something like this I think is a fine build. However, I think that this limits you. I think that bone plating falls off very hard, especially late game. So I'd like to propose something like this, which is what I think is very good, especially on a lot of jungle champions. This gives you a lot of the tenacity that you're missing since you can no longer build mercs treads. However, you're going to have to play lane better, which is simply the fact of the matter. Now that we no longer have access to all 3 rune trees, right? Because what you do beforehand, right, as a lot of assassins or junglers, is you'd go red, either vamp or sudden impact or something like that, right? And then you'd go bone plating, and then you'd go sweet tooth. And then you'd go bone plating, and then you'd go sweet tooth on everything. Except for maybe jungler where you'd go mastermind, or you'd go like, perseverance mastermind. And I think that was basically the only option because you had such a short variety. However, here, you've got 9 runes to choose from on this side. And if you're not thinking about the ability to choose from all 9 of them, then you're limiting yourself. If you're like, no, I need bone plating or I'm going to lose lane, think about ways that you can win lane without playing bone plating. I think that a lot of tech is unexplored, especially around the laning phase. And I maintain that, right? People don't lane very well in this game, at least on a non-pro level. I myself am a victim of being dog shit at lane because I only play jungle. And so you have to focus on how am I going to play lane, right? If you have a friend, hop into a mid lane 1v1 and practice because that's how you get better. Another alternative, like I said, is something like Sweet Tooth, something like Transcendence, right, where you have a bunch of options here. So I've sort of gone through a lot of the combos that I wanted to talk about. So let me get onto my Twitter profile here as we talk about some of these combos. So first of all, coup de grace, last stand, Giant Slayer. Like I said earlier, I think that Giant Slayer is probably the best of these runes. However, I think that coup de grace is a close second if you expect that the enemy team will not build any sort of tank items, right? Like let's run this scenario in your head where like the enemy team has a Camille top lane, a Jax in the jungle. They've got like a Zed mid, and they've got like a Zeri Braum bot or something. That Camille's going to build Divine Thunder, that Jax is going to build Divine Thunder, that Braum's going to build tank. That's 3 members that you're getting at least 7% bonus damage on with the coup de grace. Like I talked about earlier, if you go futures market, right, and item crafting, specifically this, I think, specifically this set of 3 is what I really think is good, because consider this, right? You can go item crafting and futures market to basically buy yourself an advantage in lane, right? You can get an item before your opponent can. You can recall and buy more items or buy an item quicker when they don't have the correct recall timer. And that will allow you to get demolished procs. So basically, right, what you're doing with these two is you are mortgaging on yourself. And I cannot explain how much I like this, because if you cannot trust, because this to me is the ultimate, like, I trust myself. If you trust yourself enough to win lane when you have an item advantage and when you have a small lead, I think this is 100% the move on a lot of champions. I don't think it's necessarily as good as some of the yellow and red runes. I think that is probably going to be more of a support, air quotes, tree. I think that it's going to be left unexplored as well, and that's going to make me really sad because I think that this tree has a lot of really cool options. But I think that these two specifically are really good. For futures market, if anybody does find any item breakpoints, please add me on Twitter at mblazekinq and let me know, because I'm really interested to see if there are any sort of breakpoints that you can break with futures market. Moving on. So yeah. Okay, so moving on. Let's go over some of the other ones that I wanted to talk about. So empowered attack, right? Versus cheap shot versus mark of the week. I think empowered attack is the worst of all of these. I think it's really bad. It's only adaptive damage, which means that it's not true damage, right? I think if you have CCE, probably a mark of the week. If Poppy ever gets added to this game, please Riot. I will probably play cheap shot with her, because cheap shot is just really good. If you're a champion like Ari that has CC and you CC into damage, I think that cheap shot is very good because it's that extra, 10 to 45 true damage, which isn't very bad, honestly. I was a bit less gung-ho on it at first. I didn't realize it was true damage. I think that's very actually good. Mark of the week. I think this one's also pretty good. It's a bit unfortunate. If you're playing it, you have to make sure that you're paying attention to the fact that it doesn't trigger on that first mark. Because if you just launch something with that first one and you're like, okay, I'm just going to deal a ton of damage, you're not actually going to be getting a lot of that extra damage, like I said. For Shield Bash, I think that Shield Bash is really, 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 really bad. I think that it will be good on some champions, but 90% of the time, I feel like you just want Scorch, because 20% of bonus AD is not a lot early game, and it's a good amount late game, but by that point, your ADC is going to be one-shotting, or whoever you're shielding is going to be one-shotting anything anyways. I think it might be useful, though, on champs like Annie, who have self-shielding and do a lot of damage. I'd also be interested to see if this procs with things like Bloodthirster, where it gives you a shield, right? So if you're a Draven, do you just go this and then just hope that you high roll, right? I think it's an interesting option. Like I said earlier, never go eyeball collection in this current state. And here's the other thing that I want to mention. The eyeball collection versus zombie ward is math that is easy to do. You should never be getting confused on that. It doesn't take too long, even if you're bad at math, right? Even if you're I'm awful at math. You can just take your calculator out and do it in a few seconds. Do the math. It will help you in the long run. Ingenious Hunter, I think, is a bit of an underrated slot in here. I think that item haste is really good, especially when it's obviously for things like your boot items, like your stasises and your stuff, but you've got to consider item passes reset quicker. So it might be a shout on let's say you're playing a Camille top lane and you don't really care about the lane matchup. Maybe you'll go something because Camille will usually do something like this. Maybe they'll go something like that, and they'll try to get the Sheen procs a bunch to win lane. Brutal is okay. I think New Triumph is actually not bad. Given that it's sort of gotten split into two, right? It's sort of split between Coup de Grace and Triumph. The old Triumph was the below damage increase and the bit of health regen. I think it's still very good. So I think that that's probably the best one of the three, especially because Gathering Storm, you really aren't going to hit a lot of the late game damage marks that you want. So you sort of got to be aware of that. That said, I also need to do some testing still. I will probably tweet it out on my Twitter, but I need to test how long legend stacks are. If anybody does have the answer for that, please let me know. For Resolve, I think that Font of Life might be a good solo rune as an alternative to Bone Plating. This sounds really, really stupid, but it's a 15-second cooldown, so it's half the cooldown, and you're healing based on your max health and AP. So like if you're like an Ari or somebody who really wants to take bone plating, but you feel like you're not going to be able to trigger all 3 hits of bone plating, like you think they're just going to hit you once and run off, I think that Font of Life is a viable alternative because you can hit somebody, get the stack, and then get some healing back. I think that it's definitely a shout. I think that it might be good specifically on champions like Swain, who are probably going to go Resolve Tree anyways, right? Like on Swain, you might go like Font of Life, Bone Plating, Overgrowth, which I think would be very good. Another big shout to Overgrowth, I think that it's kind of fucking broken. 3 max health, that's right. 3 max health, 30 stacks, that's 90. Plus 3.5%, which would be... Hold up, let me do my calculator real quick. So 90 times 3.5. It's also right. You got to consider it doesn't even. I can't even do the math on that because it's not just the max health you're gaining from Overgrowth. It's the max health you're gaining overall, right? All bonus max health is considered. So there's a lot of stuff going on in there. I think that's a very good shout for a lot of junglers, specifically the Olafs and the Aatroxes of the world. I say specifically Olaf because Olaf really liked to go conditioning as a secondary rune for green instead of things like Perseverance, because you don't really need Perseverance on Olaf. You have a CC removal in your ultimate. So I think that's definitely a shout. Finally, I think that's everything, actually. Yep, that's about everything. Finally, my last notes are Phase Rush is still very good. Play it. I think First Strike and Glacial Augment specifically is very broken. I don't remember who I heard it from, but I heard somebody mention that you could go like Glacial Augment on basically any champion that has CC that you can consistently hit with. Like you could go Glacial Augment Ari, or like Glacial Augment Annie, or like Glacial Augment Swain. Like there's a lot of champions you can go Glacial Augment on, and I think it's very good. So that's just something to consider, something to be aware of. Anyways, this has actually hit basically an hour, which is really good. So I'm going to finish it off at exactly 1 hour, which is right now.